I've been playing with a number of different tools as we do. And this one I thought was a little bit different than some of the other tools that we've been showing off. We've been playing around with IDEs and some vibe coding tools and some open source tools and projects. But this one's actually related to not only work, but like this specific project that we're doing, the AI Tools Lab Show. And I've been trying to get some stuff working over in AWS, which is where we're
Okay.
going to be hosting our infrastructure and some of the tooling that we're building for this. And we've decided to, at least for now, build out some of the project using AWS step functions. Have you ever used step functions?
I haven't. What do step functions do? I understand part of this word. Actually, I know both of these words, but together, I'm not sure I understand what they're doing.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me pull up here. I've got some
Oh, perfect.
documentation to share about it. But yeah, step functions are these things within AWS that allow you to create workflows that you can see here in the documentation. They call them state machines. I know that's a foreign term for probably a lot of people who aren't familiar with the AWS ecosystem. But essentially, you're able to build entire workflows to do all kinds of neat stuff within AWS as well as outside of AWS. You and I have talked about logic apps out of
Right.
Azure a few
Yeah.
times, and it's, I would say, similar in a lot of ways. There's definitely some differences. I can see how you might have preferences for one over the other, just depending on your familiarity with again the ecosystem. But I don't know. It's been pretty straightforward for the most part in what I'm building, but it is also a pretty simple little project that I'm doing, just some transcription on the audio that we have here, doing some analysis of that transcription. So I thought I'd run through some of the things that I bumped into as I was trying to get this to work. And then if you've got any questions about what's going on, maybe you can jump in and we can just share what we learned. A little bit more about step functions that I discovered in this experiment is that they've got their own language over there for these things called, you and I were joking about the pronunciation of it, but is it JSON Ada or JSONATA? And is it an entendrum or something like that about a sonata, or is it something about data? Uh,
A double entendre.
yeah, yeah. Somebody maybe can tell us what I guess the canon is there. Ryan's convinced that it's definitely sonata.
It sounds like we're orchestrating, so it's going to be music.
It makes sense to me. We can go with that. But the thing I'm doing inside the step function is we're calling out to some LLM or LLMs eventually, maybe, to do a few different things. And that's where I ran into friction is as I started to do some research, looking at documentation and even going on to YouTube, which I'll show in a second, some results there. I couldn't find a lot in terms of using step functions in conjunction with Bedrock. And if you're not familiar, there is a model catalog within Amazon Bedrock that you can go in and see all the different models they have available to you. We're looking here in our account and there's 229 available to us. I don't know if that's every single model that they've got, but it's definitely helpful to have a variety to choose for because as we've mentioned lots of times on this show, models are very use case dependent and
Absolutely.
also different costs and things. Anyway, so the Bedrock stuff definitely caused some complications. And like I mentioned over on YouTube, which is usually my go-to place when I'm trying to like find somebody to show me how they figured something out. I came over here and put in AWS Bedrock with step functions and I came up with nothing. There's this advertisement one here at the top and then stuff that's a year or two old. And yeah, I didn't have a lot of luck. So that was disappointing. And I was feeling a little bit out there on an island, but also step functions have been around forever. So I feel like this is something we can probably figure out, especially today. You can talk to Claude or any of them and probably get some progress made on some of these. Thankfully, we've got a teammate, James, on our team that I can lean on before I go to Claude or somebody else to help me with this kind of stuff. But this is what we're looking at right now. This is the step functions that I've been working on. This is the transcription processor one. As you can see up here is the name of it. Now, Ryan, are you familiar with this interface?
This actually looks pretty new to me. I just feel like it's got the same language as the rest of the AWS console. So it looks familiar to me, but no, that this type of workflow builder, I don't think I've seen within, I think they're called Canvas apps, but I haven't seen anything like that within AWS before. This is cool.
Okay. Yeah, it's you're right. It's got that like familiarity to it. If you've played with other tools, a little no code, low code type of thing where we can drag over stuff into our canvas here, hook things up so that they work from start to finish here in order. And there's other things we can do in here. I'm going to leave it in designer mode, but I could pop over into the code mode and it would show a lot of the things we see over here on the right. So if we pop
Okay.
in, and that way you can
You can
just
version
work
it.
right in the code if you like. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You can version control it, treat it just like any other code, but you can also work in either direction. Maybe you want to start off in with just a clean slate here, drag in a few of your actions. So in our case, we're just invoking Bedrock right out of the gate, but maybe there's another execution or a task over here that triggers and causes another thing. In fact, one of the things we'll have to figure out eventually with this particular project is what is going to invoke the model, what's actually going to
Right.
happen first. And so what will there, it's going to be based on something that's going to happen over an event bridge. And once event bridge recognizes that and takes action, then we'll be able to invoke the model from within here too. So this is very
Gotcha.
early, just experimenting with how do we get these things stitched together and doing what we want them to do. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to hand it the Bedrock model, whichever way I choose, I'm trying to hand it our transcript. So for example, from this episode, I'd be able to take the text transcript, which we obtain as soon as we're done recording it, and I want to give that into a model and then ask it to provide a summary, key takeaways, all the things that we put on each episode page. All that is done using LLMs generated just based on the transcript. It's not magic. It's a pretty straightforward process, I feel like. And we've been doing it in a variety of different ways, but we're now experimenting with doing it through state functions. And anyway, that's the bigger plan here. So we're taking the transcription and then processing it to get the summary and all those things. And then we're going to eventually put it over into a database. But for now, the way the architecture is set up is we're actually going to take that model, run what we need to on the transcription, and then eventually put it into this S3 bucket down here. And for those of you not familiar, S3 buckets are just storage buckets on the AWS. Put lots of things in there. We're just putting this markdown in there. And then again, Event Bridge will handle some other stuff. But before I'm putting it into S3, I do have this step in here where I'm trying to parse the data so that it looks in a very specific way and it's in Markdown in the right form and everything. That I've got in here, but it's not quite set up the way I want it to. So the output isn't quite right, but it does create a file, which is nice. And one of the things that you and I were looking at when we first jumped in here is down here inside the parameters for my model. I'm using Sonnet 4.0, Sonnet 4 out of Anthropic.
Yep.
And you pointed out, I've got here my max tokens are set at 9,000 and it's higher than that, I believe, in terms of
Yeah, I think so. And this may be at the edge of my knowledge, but I think even though if you've got a really big context window, sometimes when you're using tool calls or if you're sending in like a system prompt and a user prompt, you need a little buffer window basically to send the data that you're sending as well as like your system prompt and your user prompt is what I'm learning after misconfiguring a whole bunch of models in the past, I don't know, week or so. But I think that's why it's a little bit lower than what you might think the context window actually is for tokens. I believe that's the reason.
Okay. Okay. I know it's a number you can definitely play around with. And one of the way I got to this point was purely experimentation because there just wasn't a lot of clear, I'm sure the documentation's out there and I've stumbled upon some of it, but I had to do some real digging to find it just to get this format right because every model requires some small differences, it seems like. Maybe not every model, but a lot of them have different requirements. So that was problem number one, heads up number one when you're playing around with these is that realize that the parameters are unique to the model and see if you can track down the documentation that tells you which one to use. And if you're using Sonnet 4.0, here it is. This works great. I guess, Ryan, I'll just show you how this works real quick. It's very hard coded. So I'm going to pull up
I think it's okay, by the way. When you're in the dev environment, your early days with this app, you're not yet in prod. I think that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the other things that was fun about this is in order to get this to work. So if I come up here and I hit execute, okay, it fires up the state machine, the serverless thing, and I have to now provide it the input in a very specific format. Okay. And I just paste it in the transcript as is. Well, anybody who's played with these before knows that this isn't going to work. It has to be in like JSON format, right? So I can't just come in here and say, this is the transcript that I want you to use. So instead, what I did, I don't know if you caught it, is I grabbed the transcript out of here, right? So I've got it copied, it's in my clipboard. And instead of pasting it over here, I had to write this tool that I can paste it in here and actually convert it into the JSON that includes the parameter name here, question, which is what we need for our state machine to work. So you'll see down here in the parameter, it's looking for our question.
Gotcha.
And yeah, just threw together actually vibe code this little tool here to just shove the transcript into JSON in the right format so it didn't have any errors. I don't know if you've ever ran into that, but it's hard to escape like all the different commas and parentheses and random
Oh, my
characters.
friend, you're describing like, 10 years of my life.
Yeah, it's a,
Scenario, especially when you're receiving JSON from other people, which is why like validating your text input, which is what they're doing here, is so key because
yeah.
people will just send anything.
Yeah. One of the best things about this new Gen AI like situation is now I can just go in and solve this problem myself and just say, you know
Right.
what? I know what you
I was gonna-
need. Used
Yeah.
to, it was a pain in the butt for us to go just solve it, and now you just do it. So anyway, it's
Yeah.
fine.
No, I hate to be that guy, but also I'm waiting for the world where at the top of this, maybe there's a fix it for me. Google used to have I'm feeling lucky button. Like, why don't you have a hand at fixing this with Nova and see if she can make this JSON for me? But we'll get there. Baby steps.
Yeah, I do have some other opinions about that kind of stuff too. But so this is all in the right format here. Let's hit start execution and see what we can see. Obviously, green seems good at the beginning, and if we scroll down here far enough, we'll see things starting to spin up, and eventually, if the demo gods are good to us, which I feel like they should be, this one's been pretty solid so far. We'll see everything will go green here. Hey, there we go.
Nice.
Looking good.
Just as you said it.
Yeah, exactly. I love when that happens. And then we could go into what every step is here, but what I like doing is actually just go into
And it
here.
logs, right? As it's going through, you could read these logs later, presumably.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it logs, but you can see the input. Here's the question that I gave it, provided 200.
Like execution details or what have you. Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. And then I can scroll down here and look at the output. And so this is what I got back from Claude Sonnet. And you can see that it's in that format that I asked it for, and then it does have the actual summary. If we scroll down here far enough, we should see key takeaways and things like that. There we go, key takeaways. So it did what we expected it to, and we can step through that and see all that. And then it goes on to the next step, which again isn't really doing quite yet what it's supposed to. And then we get into our S3 step, and we can see again what the input is and what the output is. Threw it over into my S3 bucket, which we can confirm by coming over here. If I refresh this, we should see, here's our new JSON file, and do one of these. Oops, I always do that. Here we go.
It worked. Looks amazing.
We can see it. Yeah, shoved it over in there. And it works, I guess is what you can say. Now, one of the other things before we go is I can take this, I can invoke the model, I can parse it, put it into S3, but all that's going to require passing some information around. And so passing data between state variables, this was another piece of documentation I found helpful in sorting all this out. So I'll include that in the episode page. But as you can see, it's still very early, but we at least got the basics working. We can send in some text. It's pretty rudimentary. But it's sending it over into the model of our choice. It's doing what we ask. We can get it out and put it into S3, and now we'll move on from there.
Now, so I don't mean to stump you, but I think we were doing this in N8N before, which is I would consider a workflow engine.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty similar. Yeah.
This feels like it's like that, but almost like a superset. Is that the case, or does N8N also allow you to have thinking step or like looping steps or things like that?
N8N does allow for that. Yeah, that you can set up some different agentic things that then hook into the model of your choice.
But that's exactly what I was getting at. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not necessarily anything that I've come across anyway inside step functions that is agentic just yet. Not to say that you couldn't create something, but in terms of what I've been working on and the direction that I'm heading, it's really just more of a serverless type of alternative to building lambdas and other things. If you just don't need quite that level of sophistication and operation sort of responsibilities, state functions are very good. And also I think for proof of concept, which also might just be where we're at now, is it's going to work for this. But maybe in the future, as we scale and we make some other architectural decisions, we'll want to do it in a different way. But I think step functions and the state machines associated with them are actually a pretty useful and pretty helpful way to start building some things, including things using Bedrock.
Yeah, especially if you're in AWS. I noticed a bunch of those hooks, for example, do something when something lands in an S3 bucket. You were talking about Event Bridge, for example. It seems to have hooks into a lot of those first party Amazon
Right.
tools that are in AWS. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yep. Exactly. Cool. All right. Cool. Yeah. Thanks for allowing me to show you what
Of course, thank you
I've
very
been
much for
working on.
showing us that. That was awesome. I think at some point in time, a lot of us are building little workflows. We're working through the spreadsheet to workflow and N8N to something else. And I feel like this is where a lot of people will graduate is into a partner ecosystem or cloud ecosystem. So this is super handy.
Yep. Agreed. Cool. All right. Thanks. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Jason. Have a great day.
Bye.